Hi everyone, Michael here from Social Weaver. Today we're going to be doing a session on Mojo, mobile journalism, all about how you can use your smartphone to record, capture, edit, distribute compelling content for mostly a social media audience. So we'll be looking at recommended apps you can use, bits and pieces of equipment that will make your quality a lot higher, both in terms of visual and audio. And we'll also be looking at a few tips and techniques that you can use to ensure that your material is of a high quality. So just to start off the slides, if you want to refer to this material at a later stage, it's all available at the link on the bottom right. Is my screen sharing? I don't think so. Let me just share screen. All right. So in the middle of the screen, we have today's humble and nervous smartphone. Feeling threatened by, well, rather, making a whole range of older devices feel threatened about their use being, dwindling now. So, I mean, your modern smartphone in your pocket now, takes pictures, you can play music, it's got your calendar, your email, can do calculations for you, and even make phone calls. So quite an amazing little device we all have carrying around with us in our pocket these days. Just a quick look at the situation in terms of digital around the world as a kind of a context for the session and why we are interested in working with mobile journalism. Around 2/3 of the world's population now has a mobile phone. So that's quite a high number. And most of those people are on social media. In fact, 60%, or rather 49% of the world's population are active social media users. Many of those people would be using social media on their phones. So that's why it's important for us to know how to create content that is appealing to people who are using their phones and particularly using social media to consume content, including news content online. So we're interested in both making content that is well received and also learning how to use those devices also to actually create that content, not just to consume it. In terms of time spent using social media around the world, the average time per day is 2 hours and 24 minutes. That is the average time that people are using social media on any device around the world. In the Philippines, that's the highest with close to 4 hours per day. In South Africa, it's just over 3 hours per day. So people everywhere are using their phones for many hours in the day to, scroll through content, engage with their friends, engage with brands, consume news content. So it's really important that as news organizations, as journalists, we are producing content that appeals to those people who are using their phones to consume that kind of content. So phones have become pretty powerful in recent years and capable and much more widely used than desktops for consuming content, not just for consuming, but also producing, as we're going to see today, how powerful your phone can actually be as a content creation and editing device. Unlike big broadcast cameras, which take a lot more efforts to set up and so forth. Another big one is it's more of a psychological thing, is that people don't really feel intimidated that much when you have just a modest phone in front of them, as opposed to a big broadcast setup. So, and because they feel less intimidated, they are more likely to open up and tell you more, give you more for the story, give you a richer, give you a richer experience in the interview. Phones are obviously also really portable, which means you can get access into small confined places without too much of a problem, which can help you. And also now there is a lot of add-on, aftermarket kind of accessories, which you can add to your phone to make it really a powerhouse content production piece of tech. Things that we're going to look at in a moment, like microphones, lighting, stabilizers, and so forth. In terms of cons with using a phone, zoom is still an issue. Most phones have digital zoom. A couple of the higher end ones would have an optical zoom, but generally speaking, digital zoom is still where it's at. and that's not great at all because it pixelates your image quite badly. So try and avoid using zoom if at all possible with the phone. Also, low light phones tend to battle with low light, although they are getting more and more impressive as the tech develops, but still quite some way off from your pro videography cameras. Sound, typically the built-in mic on your phone will get the job done, but as soon as you're in a noisy environment and you need to isolate someone's voice, you're going to have issues. So that's where an external mic comes in very handy. And then lastly, battery life. I think we can all, testify to the problem of phones dying when we need them most, and the battery kind of being full when we don't really need them. That's just Murphy's law. So in summary, mobile is growing really, really quickly in parallel with social media usage around the world and in Africa. News organizations are increasingly turning to smartphone usage to file, news reports. A whole series and movies are being shot on iPhones, on other phones as well. So broadcasters, news publishers are really waking up to the fact that they can get really strong content out of mobile phones, which is obviously much cheaper. And in these times where we're needing to watch, budgets on spending, especially in the news environment, that's really an attractive proposition. So we've got more powerful phones. We've got better cameras on those phones. Sometimes you can't easily tell the difference between something shot on a phone and something shot on a camera 10 times the price, given enough lights, given enough stabilization, given good audio and so forth. Storage is less of an issue now. Storage is cheap. The networks are getting faster. We've got 5G coming in. Data is getting cheaper, slowly, but it is over time getting cheaper. So we can do more things like live streaming in higher quality, and soon longer lasting batteries. So those are the tech kind of areas to look at. But, as journalists, we know that the tech is just a means to an end. Anyone can play around with tech, but ultimately it comes down to, the fundamental truth of good journalism, which is a good story. And your phone and the apps that you use and the equipment that you use are merely enablers of a good story. So it's still up to us as a journalist to think in terms of story, to make sure we have a strong concept, make sure we have strong sources, make sure we pick the right kind of elements to put into our content. So when producing Mojo, mobile journalism, mobile content, we need to think of a few things before we even start producing. We need to think about the size of the video. Is it going to be 16:9? Is it going to be 9:16 or portrait? So, where is it going? Is it going as a longer form piece on YouTube? Or is it going out as a live stream on Instagram? Is it perhaps going out as a WhatsApp status? So you need to think about the sort of the dimensions before you produce, before you edit. Also, think about a non-audio audience, so an audience who perhaps has their audio turned off by default. This is often the case, if people are moving around on, they're in public, or they're in a meeting, or wherever they are, and they just want to keep their audio off. So we need to make sure we can grab their attention, even if their audio is off. How do we do that? Primarily with text overlays. Just on top of the visuals to explain more of what's going on, using captions and whatnot. And then we need to keep things short and snappy on social media. We know this. We know that's it's quite a difficult thing to get someone's attention and to keep their attention in this time when there's just so much content out there competing for our audience's attention. So how do we grab their attention immediately with a strong visual, and then keep their attention with strong story development? Things to think about. I'm sure many of you would remember this video that caused quite it was a big story about 2-3 years ago, of this guy who sort of threw his weight around in Spur. The kids were arguing in the play area. He got all angry and there's a confrontation. So the original video that was sourced for this was 2.5 minutes long. You can see it on the left there. It was vertical. Then Al Jazeera Plus got that video and repurposed it into something that is more effective for social media. If you click through in the slides, you'll be able to watch that video. I'm not going to play it in full right now, but things that they did to take a raw video and make it more social friendly were to add text overlays, as you can see on the top here. They also attributed the source where the original video was from. Really important if you are reusing, repurposing video that you found on social media. They added music into this video. Obviously, the original video didn't have music, but they've added some dramatic music, which can increase the emotional appeal of the content. They edited it to be much shorter. It's kind of half the length now. It's just over 1 minute long, which is better for social media. Also, what they did, which is very good journalistically, is to just include a couple of tweets as overlays, as screenshots in the video, which helps to give more context and more sides to the story. Official comment from Spur or reactions from people across the board about the story. So part of our role as journalists, as mobile journalists, is not just to shoot footage and edit it on our own, but also to curate content from elsewhere online in a way that helps people to make sense of what happened or what is happening. So that means incorporating other elements like screenshots of tweets into the mobile content that you are producing. And they've also edited it square, so that works better on social media. Generally, square is a good compromise if you're not sure whether to go horizontal or vertical. So they've gone with square, which obviously takes up the same amount of screen space regardless of whether someone is holding their phone vertically or horizontally. Just quickly to tell you about a group on Facebook called Mojo Fest Community. Mojo Fest is a mobile journalism festival that's been happening for a couple of years, mostly over in Ireland. And it's where journalists gather to talk about the latest, trends and developments and equipment and best practices with mobile journalism. And that event then spawned this group on Facebook, which is a super, super useful group. People in there from all major broadcasters around the world and lots of minor ones as well, just talking about their experiences with doing Mojo, the phones they use, the mics they use, techniques they use to produce better stories, apps that they use for creating social media content and so forth. So if you're wanting to get more stuck into this Mojo thing, I would really recommend joining this particular group on Facebook. It's called hashtag Mojo Fest Community. As you can see on the screen, where the global Mojo community meet and share. Okay, let's talk a little bit now about equipment, and then we're going to move into technique, and then we'll also look at apps for shooting and for editing right on your phone. Okay, in terms of essentials that you need, obviously you need a phone to start off with. It does not need to be a high-end phone. You don't need to drop 10K plus on an iPhone or the latest Samsung in order to get good results. As we said before, the tech is a means to an end. What you do need to do is figure out the objective for the content that you want to make and think about how you're going to make it as compelling as possible. And you don't need an expensive phone to do that. So don't fall into the trap of trying to obsessing about the most expensive equipment. That's not as important as what's going on inside your head in terms of putting the content together. So generally, most mid-range phones and even some of the cheaper ones will have a camera that's perfectly capable. Yeah. The second really important thing is power. It's a good idea to have a power bank with you because as you can see in the little image here, when you really need your battery, it tends to be empty, and when you really don't need it, it tends to be full. So it's a good idea if you are going out to cover a story, you don't know how long you're going to be out there, might go on for a few hours, your phone is going to die and you are going to be sad. So make sure you have a power bank with you so you can keep shooting or keep live streaming. In terms of storage, High definition video does eat a lot of storage, especially if you're shooting 4K. But luckily, most Android phones can take a micro SD card, so you can add 1632 gigs very easily to your storage capacity for not much money at all. If you are an iPhone user, you unfortunately cannot plug in an SD card. So hopefully you bought a big enough device in the first place. It's also useful to get into the habits of clearing out media from your phone on a regular basis. So go out, shoot, come back, work with it, back your footage up to an external device or to the cloud, and then delete from your gallery, so that you always have enough space on your device. Okay, so those are the main three things. In terms of extras, audio is obviously a hugely important add-on that can make a significant difference to the quality of your work. So we'll look at a couple of different microphones options now. Then stability as well is something that can make a big difference, and for very little money and very little efforts as well. So stability being things like mini tripods, or even a gimbal, or what's called a cage. I've got some here that I'm going to show you in a moment. The nice thing is that all these add-ons, because there's so many of them now, there's so many companies manufacturing this kind of stuff, the prices have dropped a lot, and you can really pick up these things for much less money than you might imagine. And some news organizations are actually buying kits and providing them to their journalists, just to enhance their video shooting capabilities without having to spend 50 grand plus on pro broadcasts equipment. Lighting is the third extra that you might be interested in. Also now a lot of sort of portable LED lighting solutions available to work with smartphones, which can really enhance content if you are in a low light situation inside, or even just if you need some full light. And then clip-on lenses is the fourth category of equipment. These are things like fisheye lenses, wide angles, macros, and even telephoto. So those are the main categories of extra equipment. Here you can just see some of the equipment in action. I'm going to show you some of the stuff as well. Okay, so let's talk about sound. So there's two main types of microphones that you can get for using with your phone. One is a lavalier or lapel. The other one is sort of like a shotgun mic or a rifle mic, as you see below. This is the Rode brand, and this is generally the top end brand, and these are the most expensive. However, there's a newer brand called Boya, which produces excellent quality mics, definitely rivaling the Rodes, but for much cheaper. This is the Boya, an example of the Boya microphones. So you can get a single lavalier like this for recording one person, or you can get them also make a dual lavalier. So you've got two mics running into one phone. That's great if you obviously want good quality audio from both yourself and your interviewee. And they come with really long cables, so that's great for social distancing. This is the other sort of the rifle or the shotgun mic from Boya, and this also just works with your smartphone. It can also work with a laptop or with an SLR camera, and it comes with a windshield for windy situations. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen briefly. Stop sharing because I want to show you some of the stuff. So hopefully you can all still see. Let's see, there's something going on in the chat. Let me just have a look. Okay, that's fine. So hopefully you're all still with us. But this is an example of the Boya mic that I just showed you. So this is a little condenser. For those of you in South Africa, this is just a few $100 on Take-A-Lot, and it plugs straight into your phone and gives you much better quality than just the built-in mic. This is the lavalier mic from Boya. So this would clip onto your shirt or onto your interviewees' clothing, and the other end just plugs into your phone. It's also got a button here where you can switch between camera and smartphone. So you can see it can work with an SLR or another kind of camera, or your laptop, or with your smartphone. So that's microphones. This is the little windshields for this boya. It just pops right on, and then it makes a huge difference if you're outdoors. That's another weakness of built-in mics on a smartphone, is that you're going to get this kind of noise coming through. Generally, if you're in a windy environment, I'm sure you're familiar with that. But this cuts out a lot of the wind noise, so it's pretty effective. So that's audio. Then in terms of stability, you can get yourself something like this, just a little grip, which has a little tripod mount, so that can sit on top of a tripod, or you can just hand hold it. You can then use a little mounts for your phone and stick your phone in here, and then you can put a microphone or lighting on top. So this mic, this boya mic, would just slip right in here to the top of this thing. There we go. Come on, there we go. It should go. Doesn't want to go. I'm not sure why. But I've also got another one here, which I actually prefer. This is what's called a cage, and I've got my lights on it at the moment. You can see that light shining bright. Let's turn the lights off so you can see a bit better. Okay, so that's just what's known as a cage, and it's got a little mini tripod at the bottom, so you can obviously stand it on a desk and for stability for an interview. It's got a ball head like a tripod, so you can move it around any angle and then tighten it, which is really useful if you want to point up or down at something. It's got a clamp here for your phone to sit inside. So it could take any phone right up to, really big sizes of the latest high-end phones. It's got cold shoe sockets on the top for your lights, for your microphones. So I can plug in the mic like this. Get that in there. Unscrew it a bit. There we go. Okay, so there I've got my cage, I've got my mount or my grip for my phone, I've got my microphone, and I've got my light, and my hands are free to move around. This will also stabilize your shots a lot more than just using your hands. It's not a gimbal, it doesn't have a motor inside it. The gimbals are a lot more expensive, but if you have the budget for a motorized gimbal, they are super effective at keeping your shots perfectly stable, even when you're walking over rough terrain. This is just commonly known as a selfie stick, but it can actually be very useful for journalists. This one sort of pops out as a tripod as well, so it can sit on your desk. Phone would go into the clamp, and it also, obviously, like any selfie stick, extends, which means you can get above a crowd. If you want to get a sort of a higher angle shot on something that's happening, perhaps people have gathered around someone who's giving a statement, and you need to get some elevation, you can use this to do that. This is what's called a gorilla pod. It's just basically a mini tripod with flexible legs. Sometimes they have magnetic feet, which means you can stick them to anything metal, like a car. The legs are flexible, so you can wrap them around a chair or a tree or anything that you can find in your environment. And again, just a standard mount or clamp on top. So all of these things use kind of standard, tripod connections. So they're interchangeable. So I could use my microphone on this. I could use my light on something else. Very interchangeable. So it's good to have a couple of options that you can work with. These things are very affordable on Takealot. The microphones as well, and the lights. If you go to Takealot and search for vlogging, you're going to find all this stuff. Sometimes they're sold in kits, so you'll get what's called the cage, and you'll get a light, and you'll get a mic in a bundle um, for around 800-900,000 rand, depending on which mic comes with it, which light comes with it. Obviously, the light is going to push up the price a bit. Then you need to make a choice of which mic you want. This is an example of a telephoto lens. This will just clip onto your phone. This is I think it's 9 or 10 times telephoto, 10 times mobile telephoto lens, if you can see there. My webcam is not the greatest. So this is great if you're filming, a sports match or an event where you can't get very close, social distancing. So this would require you to have a tripod or one of these mini ones. Get your phone onto here, get it stable. Really important if you're using a telephoto lens, is to keep things stable. Otherwise, you're going to be jumping around a lot, which is not great. So these two things enable you to shoot good quality footage from a distance, 10 times optical. And you also get macro lenses, which enable you to focus extremely close for creative close-up shots, and wide angle lenses as well, if you're wanting to just have that super wide kind of look. So those are the lenses, also extremely cheap, generally about $100 for 3 of them, which is pretty amazing. This is my latest little adapter, and this is an adapter that lets me plug in a microphone and headphones into one port. So it's a splitter, it's a 2 into 1. So I plug in my mic into here, and my headphones into here, and this into my phone. Then I can monitor my audio while I am recording it, and play stuff back as well, without having to keep unplugging the mic and plugging it back in again. So that's really, really useful. You also get ones for USB-C and for Lightning for Apple devices. So you can plug in any of these Boya mics and any headphones into the respective jacks, and then straight into your phone. Lets you record audio and monitor audio, playback audio at the same time, which is pretty useful. So that was a look at equipment. Just another little mic. I've got here another one from Boya. Comes in a nice little pouch, which you can also use for wedding rings or whatever. This is a little Boya, little condenser mic. This one does twists, so you can change the angle according to how you want it. So this would just plugs directly into your phone's headphone jack, or even into the end of this splitter. But then you need to find a way to mount this somehow. So it's going to come down to playing around with different combinations of the gear. Just want to quickly share screen again with you. Hope everyone is still alive out there. This virtual training thing is kind of weird because you don't really know who's paying attention and who's not and what's going on. But so this is Takealot, which is I think people are familiar with what Takealot is. If you're not from South Africa, this is just a online shop where you can buy almost everything. I've run a search here for vlogging, and you can get an idea of the pricing of stuff here. This is a ring light, which is a little bit more conducive to vlogging than some of the other types of lights, and they often are combined here. You can see with mounts, cages, tripods, microphones. So for about 1,300 Rand, you can get this kit, which consists of the cage and the tripod and a light and a microphone. So you've got a complete solution there for 1,300 Rand, which is absolutely crazy when you compare that to the price of high-end broadcast equipment. So this is really appealing for organizations who are on a limited budget, which includes pretty much all media organizations these days. Gone are the days of huge budgets for equipment. So, I mean, good stories are our bread and butter. Good stories are what keeps us alive as journalists, as journalism organizations. We need the right equipment to produce those stories. And now there is a lot of this kind of equipment available to help us with Mojo stories. And the pricing is really not exorbitant at all. So lots of different options here. Um, as soon as you go for your motorized gimbals like this one, you're going to start paying a little bit more, purely because of the electronics involved. But I find that if you just use a cage like the one I demoed and you hold still, and your phone perhaps has optical or image stabilization built in, which some phones do have, then you can get by without needing a gimbal. We're not trying to produce Hollywood level stuff here. We're just trying to get stable, well-lit shots with good audio. News is not about Hollywood style production. In terms of the Boya microphones, here you can get an idea of pricing. The one that I just showed you with the windshield is under 500 Rand. The lavalier is 270 Rand. The dual lavalier should be somewhere under here as well. You also get wireless systems, but that's getting a bit more pro. Yeah, so that's just an idea of the pricing of these things. So quite accessible. This is the very popular one. This is the one, the lavalier, the Boya BY-M1, and with the long cable. 270 Rand, that's really not much money, especially if you're buying it for your organization. And the difference in audio between built-in mic and this mic is really huge. You'll notice it straight away, especially when it comes to isolating voices in noisy environments. This mic is going to do a lot better of a job than your built-in mic on your phone. So that's what it looks like. Okay, let's close that. All right, so let's get back to, sorry, I think I have to switch over this share to the other screen. Okay, there we go. Okay, so that was a whirlwind tour of kind of equipment that you might be interested in getting to just really start practicing with and seeing what you can do. Lighting we spoke about. Okay, so let's talk now a little bit about technique and planning before we look at recommended free apps that you can use to shoot and edit. I just want to check the chat quickly and see if I'm missing anything. If anyone has a question, you can unmute and ask the question now. I'm happy with that. Otherwise, I'll just continue. Okay, so in terms of technique and planning, some practical tips at the outset is, okay, the first one, the number one rule, or not rule, but recommendation when you're going out and shooting on your phone is put your phone in flight mode. And that's for two reasons, really. One is obviously to avoid interruptions. You don't want to be interviewing the mayor or whoever, and then you get a phone call and your interview is interrupted. Even things like notifications vibrating can ruin your audio. So put your phone in flight mode to avoid interruptions. And also flight mode saves battery. It really saves battery because it turns off all your network connections. It turns off Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, everything. So it really helps to conserve battery. Generally, you're going to want to shoot in landscape mode, so 16:9, but vertical can work as well. Here's an example on the right of a little mini doc about a beauty salon that was shot vertically. I'm hoping that the sound is coming through for you, but essentially, let me just take this full screen for a bit. So at the outset of this video, they decided they want to shoot vertically, and they set up all their shots accordingly so that it looks good vertically. Look at how they're keeping all their subjects quite big in the frame. Look at how they have chosen a variety of different angles and shot types, and they don't leave one shot on for too long. They're moving to a different angle. There's always action going on in the shots. There's something happening. That's another way of keeping
Well,
people's
absolutely.
attention.
That's very
There is
It
text
is a
at the
very
bottom,
important
so you can
very
read
important.
what she is
Some
saying if you are not able
as
to
PhD,
hear it.
some as after party
I'm
carry on,
not going to
some
play the
after
whole
party
thing, but just to give you
being
an
able to
idea
carry
of
themselves
a
the
really
way
nicely
possible
made
make
kind of vertical
that they
piece
just have to do
of content,
something.
profiling
They
the
just
owner
have
of
to
this
empower themselves the
salon.
best.
And this
and
story obviously lends
making money
itself quite
and
nicely to
making money
strong visuals because there
standing
is a
first
lot going on
and just doing nothing.
visually. But then some nice close-ups
With
here as
music.
well, and some music in the background. So that's just a really short little profile on a beauty salon, shot vertically, edited vertically, obviously. And you know, the truth is that most people are holding their phones vertically in their hands anyway. Um, so it's kind of a you kind of have to think whether you want to create a vertical video because the person is most likely to be watching vertically by default, or make it horizontal because that's what our eyes are much more used to when it comes to consuming video content, or square because you're not sure. So there's no one right answer here, and there's much more of a stronger case being made recently for vertical, uh, whereas in previous years vertical was a huge no-no, and we frowned upon people shooting in the wrong way. But now there's a bit of a blurry line between what is the wrong way and what is the right way to shoot, because people hold their phones vertically by default. So why shouldn't we make content that is vertical by default? Anyway, that's something for just to think about. But one thing there is just not to don't mix it. So don't shoot some things vertically, some things horizontally for the same video, and then you're trying to mix them up in when you're editing. That's not gonna work so well. So just try and avoid black bars on either side or on the top and the bottom, if at all possible. Okay, so the next tip there is to try and get variety. See, there's a question from Sammy, the best resolution. So let me just get back to that question. It's disappeared off my screen. Um, Sorry, that question has gone away. But I think it was about the best resolution to use. So resolution really is just a term that refers to the dimensions of the video that you're shooting. Resolution doesn't actually have anything to do with the actual image quality. It only refers to the size, the dimensions of the video. So 1980 by 10, sorry, what is it? 1920 by 1080, which would be full HD, or 4K, which is four times that, or smaller resolutions like 800 by 600. So that's just the dimensions of the image. And the more pixels you have to play with, the more you can crop into that. So if you're shooting 4K, that's great. If you need to crop away some of the material to get a tighter shot, and you don't sacrifice on quality there. So if you have 4K on your phone, and if you have enough space, and if you have enough battery power, then yes, shoot 4K because you can crop afterwards. But if you're limited in terms of storage space, battery life, then shoot either Full HD or 720, which is just below um, Full HD. If you are really tight for space or for time, then you can shoot an even lower resolution. An app that I'm going to show you just now allows you to switch between a lot of different resolutions on your phone. Sometimes your native camera app only shoots in one specific resolution. There are apps that let you change that resolution. So just to get back to what I was saying about resolution and quality, there's two things that affect your final quality. One is resolution, the dimensions of the video. The other is bitrate. Bitrate is just the amount of data that the phone is actually recording, image data coming in through the lens. So the higher the bit rates, the better the picture is going to look. And we'll get to how to work with those in a moment as well. So don't be fooled when a phone manufacturer tries to sell you a 50 megapixel camera, or if this phone can shoot 8K or whatever. Megapixels is largely a marketing gimmick. What we should rather be looking at is actual image quality, which is a separate thing to the dimensions or the resolution of the image. So I hope that answers the question. So we're talking about getting a variety of different shot types. As we saw in the example on the right, every few seconds it was moving on to another shot, another person, another action, very important. Wide shots, close shots, panning shots. So always try and mix up your shot types as much as possible. Keep your light source behind you so that the light shines directly onto your interviewee's face. If you are interviewing someone, up against the window and the window is behind them, then it's probable that they will be underexposed because the camera is not sure what to do. So try and keep your light sources behind you so that they illuminate your subject, whether that is natural light coming in from a window, whether it is the light you've got attached to your phone, or whether it is the sun outside. Always try and keep the light behind you. Think about people using phones, which most people watching your content will be using. Phones typically have smallish screens, so try and keep your subjects large in the frame and hold still, as still as you can. Use both hands, tuck your elbows in. For extra stability, you can use any of the accessories that I've shown to you, the cages, or even the selfie stick would help a little bit. If you don't have any of that with you, then just keep your elbows tucked into your body instead of protruding out in front of you, and keep your feet shoulder width apart just for more stability. And lastly, avoid zooming because generally that's going to be a digital zoom and it's going to destroy your image quality. And you can experiment with cropping for tighter shots. And that's where shooting at a higher resolution is very useful because you can get away with cropping more and not losing quality. Some tips about sound. Once again, make sure your phone is on flight mode. We don't want to have our sound recording interrupted by anything. Try and use an external microphone. You also do get Bluetooth microphones, not just wired microphones. And you can also use your existing mics if you have, pro grades, radio mics, or any of the Shure kind of that people use. You can actually use those quite easily with your smartphone, just with the correct adapter. So you look around on Takealot or elsewhere online for those. But pretty much any microphone, even if it's got an XLR connection, you can use with a smartphone. So that's up to you, depending what you're recording and your specific requirements. But for everyone, I'd recommend at least getting one of those Boya lavaliers for 270 Rand as a start, just to, if you are just sort of starting out trying to produce better content on your phone, that would be the perfect first mic to experiment with. If you don't have an external mic plugged in and you're just relying on your internal mic, make sure your fingers aren't actually blocking the microphone. Your microphone on your phone is just a little sort of pinprick. Make sure you know where that is on your phone, and make sure that you don't cover that with your finger. We've often seen that happening where people go out and shoot, and then they come back and the audio is very muffled and they're wondering why. And it's simply because they covered the mic with their finger. Same thing with the lens. Don't don't let your finger get in front of your lens. Even if it's just a small part, you're still going to notice that, and it's still going to be a problem. Also, fingers tend to smudge lenses, so make sure that you always clean your lens. Just wipe it with a piece of cloth, so that you have a nice clear shot every time. So yeah, don't block the mic, don't block the lens, and clean the lens whenever you think about it. Using an app to monitor levels is a good idea as well. Some of the shooting apps that I'm going to be showing you do have audio monitors built in, so you can see what kind of level of audio you're getting coming through. You can also, if you've got a splitter like I showed you, you can obviously listen to that and make sure that the level is coming through fine and that there's no distracting other noises as well. Another tip is to record audio separately. So you can attach a lavalier to your source and run that into a separate phone which can just sit in the pockets of your source or on behind them or on a little table next to it. So you're recording your audio separately, which means you're more free to sort of move around and get different types of shots with your primary phone that you're using for video. And then your audio is going nice and cleanly into the secondary phone. And you're not going to get strange sounds coming from cables, being moved around too much or so forth. So that's another idea. And you can use any, budget phone to do that. Most of them have a headphone jack or mic jack. That's all you need. And then you can obviously just take that audio file and bring it in and sync it up with your video file afterwards, which is quite easy. And then just test your audio before to make sure it's working. Oftentimes we find people go out and do an interview and they're just hoping and they're praying that the audio is being recorded, but it's not, and they don't know because there's no visual indicator and they don't have headphones, so they're not aware of that. They come back and they're like, this is a great video, but where's the audio? It's not there. So make sure that you test your setup first. That includes making sure that your external mic works with the camera app that you've chosen to use, and that there's nothing wrong with your ports, your headphone ports on your phone. Sometimes those ports start giving problems and the audio doesn't come in cleanly. So just test that before. Okay, in terms of technical considerations for social media content, we've spoken about your dimensions or your resolution. Think about that before producing. Think about screen real estate. That means how much of someone's screen is your content taking up when they're looking at it. The more, the merrier. Obviously, if they're holding their phone horizontally and your video is horizontal, then you're getting 100% of the screen real estate. If your content is horizontal, but they're holding their phone vertically, your video is only going to take up a very small proportion of that screen real estate, and it won't be as appealing, and it'll be harder for them to read the text, harder for them to see faces and so forth. So think about screen real estate. With Square, you're always going to get about 66% of the real estate, regardless of which way someone holds their phone. So that's a good compromise, but it's not great. But yeah. Audio, most of your viewers will have their sound off by default at first. So you can either prompt them with text or with a little sticker or a button to turn their sound on, or just try and make sure that the video actually makes sense, even if audio is off, using text, using creative visuals and so forth. In terms of length, people often ask, what is the best length for a video on Facebook or whatever? There is no answer to this. There is no best length. Generally, short and snappy is better, but Facebook recently has been pushing creators to create longer videos, probably because they're trying to, make more money, sell more ads. But generally, the rule of thumb is that people are impatient. There's, it's the infinite scroll. We all know about that, just scrolling. It never ends. So how do we make sure that we grab someone's attention and keep their attention? If you are, if you're going to play or show a 20-minute interview with someone as a Facebook video, that's not going to work very well, unless maybe it's a live video. But so generally the rule is for edited videos, keep it short and sweet, snappy. Shorter is better, except for lives. Obviously lives, longer is better, but that's a different format completely. Okay, so we like to think about mobile content creation as a similar process to baking a cake. If you are making a cake, you have a reason for making that cake. It's someone's birthday, it's someone's wedding, whatever the case might be, there's a reason, there's an objective for making a cake. Same with Mojo. Why are you producing a piece of content? What is the story? What is the message? What are you trying to convey? Who is it for? So, and as with a cake, you need ingredients. You need your milk, your flour, your eggs, your cocoa. When you are creating mobile content, you also need ingredients. You need different types of shots. You need different elements. Those elements can be broken up into visual and audio, which we'll get into in a bit. So you need those ingredients to make the cake. With a cake, you're going to need your tools. You're going to need, your oven and your whisk and your bowl and your scale. With Mojo, that translates into the different apps and the different equipments that you choose to use to work with your ingredients in the most effective way. With a cake, you need a recipe or you need a method. You need some kind of a sequence as to how you're going to do things. Which ingredients are you going to put in first? Which are you going to put in last? How are you going to work them together? If you don't have a plan to use your ingredients and you just use them randomly, you're probably going to end up with a flop. Same with content. You need to decide how are you going to work with your ingredients or your elements in the best possible way for the best possible results. So when we talk about ingredients in mobile journalism, it's broken down into visual and audio. Visually, obviously, the first thing we tend to think of is video that we've actually shot ourselves using our own phones. And make sure you get a wide variety of different types of shots when you're out shooting something. So establishing shots, showing the scene, wide shots, and then going closer in. You can even go in for really, really close-up shots or even some macro shots, depending on the topic or the story that you're doing. Pannings to show that more of the environment. Action, this is really important. Action doesn't necessarily mean things blowing up, and exploding. It's not that kind of action. It's just something going on in the image. For example, in that salon video, it would be the close-up of the lipstick being applied. So anything that has motion in the shot is good. People like to see motion, things happening. Another visual ingredient would just be interviewing yourself. So using your front camera to shoot yourself, providing extra information about the story, just as if you were doing a news package for TV. Um, Time lapse is when you shoot something over a long period of time and you speed it up. For example, a sunset or a traffic at an intersection. And you can also make creative use of slow motion, which can sometimes help to show an emotion in a particular scene. Still photographs are also very good for showing emotion if you can get that right, or obviously for freezing a moment. Other examples of visual ingredients include screen recordings. So you can do a screen recording where you are scrolling through content on a web page or using a particular app, or moving around on Google Maps and zooming into a particular spot. You can record anything like that on your phone as a screen recording and use that as a visual element in your Mojo production, which is quite nice. Screenshots as well. This works well for example, a tweet. If you want to just add a tweet into a video that you're producing, you can just screenshot it and drop it right in as a visual element. Other things you might want to think about are maps, charts, infographics. Be careful with infographics though, because you don't want to have something that's too cluttered on a small screen. So make sure that it's actually legible and mobile friendly. Just because something worked as a full page spread in a newspaper doesn't mean it's going to work on a mobile screen. Little illustrations and whatnot, and text is a really important visual ingredient. The obvious things here are, people's names, subtitles, and you might want to also put in additional info. You might want to do captions. Text is always a winner, but not too much text, just a couple of words here and there. In terms of audio ingredients, there's a lot going on actually with audio that you might not, at first be conscious of. And this is your ambient audio or your environmental audio. And you need to ask yourself, does the ambient audio in a particular location help me to tell the story? Is there information coming through in that audio that conveys meaning to my audience? Or is it just noise? Is it irrelevant? And that would, you need to think about that and then choose, maybe I should go to a different location to shoot this interview, or maybe I should get more of this ambient sound. Maybe it's crowd noise, people protesting. Maybe that's, in that case, that would be useful audio information to include in the story. If you're wanting to isolate the background noise, maybe it's a restaurant and that's the only place and time that a source is able to meet you, then you would plug in your lavalier mic so that you could isolate their voice and remove, or at least minimize that background audio, which would otherwise be distracting. So just be aware of background audio at all times and decide, do I want this audio or don't I want it? And that will also play a role in helping you to choose which microphone to use in any particular situation. So examples of audio ingredients would be your ambient sound. It would obviously be your interviews. It could be yourself, either a piece to camera where you're directly talking into the camera, or just a narration, just a voiceover that you've recorded separately and then dropped in. It's really easy to do that. Music can also help depending on the type of content you're producing. Music can add a sort of a richness to the piece and add emotion and make people feel, more like engaging with it, sharing it. And phone calls, you can, phone someone, record it, and then drop bits of that into your video as well. Make sure you inform the person that you are recording the call and that they're cool with that. Otherwise, you might get into a bit of legal trouble. But yeah, it's really easy to call someone up and record that call on your phone. There are apps for that. And then you can use bits of that interview audio directly in your video. So those are some examples of audio ingredients. Okay, so to continue the cake analogy, you've decided which ingredients you need, which elements you need in order to best tell the story. And even before that, you've decided what your story is, why you are telling the story, who you are telling it to or for, what platform it's going on. These are all things you should have thought about beforehand. And what is the meaning or message that you want to actually convey with this content. So you've got that all together. You've decided which shots you need, where you need to go, the different locations you might want to go for the story, the people you need to speak to, additional visual elements that you might find useful, for example, a Google map showing the location of something, or a chart showing an alarming trend or pattern that relates to your story. Then you need to decide on the sequence that you want those ingredients to appear. Remember, a video is a linear piece of content. People can sort of skip around in it if they want, but generally people will play it from beginning to end, hopefully. So, and everyone's going to start a video at the beginning. That's how videos work, and we need to make sure that we instantly grab their attention with our strongest shot, our strongest quotes, whatever is the most compelling content we have. We need to lead with that in order to hopefully keep someone's attention. So that would be your sequence, and then just take a pen and a paper and just sort of mind map it, draw it out, draw a timeline, and plan your content on a piece of paper before getting stuck in. What makes a good story for social media? So this is sort of more the psychological aspect now, moving away from the technical considerations. Generally, people love stories about people. Social media is called social media because it's about people interacting with each other, people being social. And people identify more strongly with a story that is told through a person's eyes or ears. So yes, giving information, explanation about an important issue or trend or whatever it is, but trying to tell that story through someone, through their lived experience. That's always going to be stronger than without having that sort of character to relate to. And this is especially true about heroes, so people as heroes or even villains. This generates, a conversation on social media. People identifying with, congratulating a hero for doing something really well, or people being angry with a villain for, being corrupt or committing a crime or whatever it is that they did. So people want to relate to characters and feel like they're actually a part of the story as well. People are also attracted to stories with emotion. Now, we shouldn't try and deliberately stir up emotions in a sort of a malicious or cheeky way. We're not in the business of tabloid content style production here, but we do want to grab someone's attention and make them feel something about our content. So it's okay to, express some personality and to be a little bit animated in when you're producing Mojo content. This is not, a courtroom. This is not, we're not writing an encyclopedia here. We're not producing, a technical manual. We are trying to appeal to people. So it's okay to have a bit of life presence in your content, but it's up to you as to, where the line is there. Yeah. And people love images, visual content, especially moving visual content. That's the easiest and the quickest for our brain to process, and that's what performs the best on social media is, video content. Okay, let's talk a little bit about apps. Are there any questions at this point? If so, please unmute yourself and ask. Or if anyone would like to just introduce themselves to the group and say perhaps their experience with mobile journalism in the workplace. Maybe you are already using your phone to produce content for your organization. I'm not sure. So if anyone wants to chip in, please do so now while I take a sip of water. Okay, so we're going to look at apps now. I'm going to demo one or two of these for you. And most of these apps are free. Some of them do have a premium version, which unlocks a few more features, but generally most of these are free. There's a couple of categories of apps that we need to consider as budding mobile journalists. One is shooting, one is editing video, and one is editing photo, and one is working with audio, both recording audio and editing audio. Maybe you're from a radio station and audio is your game. So there are apps that can let you edit audio on the fly as well on your phone. So we can break these down into Android and iOS as well. For shooting, why would you need a third-party app for shooting when your phone comes with a camera app by default? Well, depending on your phone, you might or you might not have access to more manual, settings for shooting. So sometimes we want control over things like focus, white balance, exposure, your bit rates, your resolution, as we spoke about earlier. Some of the native camera apps don't provide that level of flexibility. So then we need to turn to a third-party app like Open Camera, Cinema FV5, or Filmic Pro. Filmic Pro is the top end of the apps that do this. It is a paid app, so just remember that. But it does have the most impressive features and whatnot. But that's at the high end. I would recommend for getting started with this an app called Open Camera or Cinema FV5. And there are a few others for iOS as well. And this is the kind of discussion that the people in that Mojo group on Facebook that I mentioned, that they're having all the time, because, apps come and go. So journalists are constantly, trying to make sure that they're using the app or the apps that, are the best fit for the job and best value for money. So this changes every few months. But for now, I recommend playing around with Open Camera or Filmic Pro. And for video editing, the one that I or we recommend by far is called KineMaster, Kine Master, and that's available across Android and iOS. It is free, although it does put a little watermark on the top right of videos. But I think the paid version is about 35 Rand per month, which is really not much, and that means you can get rid of the watermark. It also gives you access to more advanced features and elements that you can add on. Other options which you can consider for Android are Power Director, Quick, InShot, and Filmora Go. So I'd recommend just experimenting with those. Your device may or may not support one or others of those. There might be some limitations. So it's a matter of testing which app works best on your device, which one you like the most, what you're willing to pay. Like I said, if you're willing to pay 35 Rand a month, you can get the full pro version of KineMaster, which is well worth the money. And on iOS, the sort of Rolls Royce of editing apps is Luma Fusion, and it's a really impressive app. And obviously, the more complicated an app gets, the more finicky it might seem, the higher the learning curve. Some people choose to use LumaFusion on a tablet because it's quite involved, and obviously on a tablet you've got more room, and you can have a lot more going on at the same time. But I think generally the idea we're trying to the idea we're trying to convey, or the thing we're trying to achieve here, is to enable basic video editing on a phone. Not all of us want to be high-end video editors. We just want to be able to set an in point, set an out point for an interview. We want to add other audio, we want to add another photograph, we want to add text, and then we want to publish it. Done. So in that case, something like KineMaster would be perfectly fine. So I'm going to demo Open Camera and KineMaster in a minute. For photo editing, Snapseed is a completely free app from Google, contains no ads. I don't know about you guys, but my sort of pet hate with new apps is that they're generally loaded with ads, which gets really irritating. But Snapseed is powerful, it's clean, it's free, it's ad-free, and it works on iOS and Android. So if you're looking for a decent photo editor, which also lets you add text onto photos, Snapseed is the way to go for that. In terms of audio, there's a number of options available across Android and iOS. You might want to look at Wave Editor or WavePad on Android. And on iOS, you might want to look at Rev Voice Recorder or WavePads as well. Just again there, make sure that the apps actually support or recognize your external mic if you're using one. Sometimes some of the apps don't recognize certain external mics, so just make sure you test that as well. So for time lapses, you can use hyperlapse. If you want to do 360-degree panorama kind of shots, you can use cardboard camera. For recording calls, you can use the very aptly named call recorder or similar. And for adding animated text, text that moves around on an image or on a video, you can use an app called Legend. Okay, so here's a screenshot of the Mojo apps folder that I've got on my phone. What I want to do now actually is share my phone screen with you. So let me stop this, and I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to share my phone screen so that I can demo some of these apps for you. Okay. Just going to quickly look in the chat and see what's going on here. So I'm just reading the chat's comments very quickly. Okay, so these are the apps I've got installed on my phone for Mojo, some of the ones I've mentioned and some others that I perhaps haven't. I want to show you two. They are Open Camera and KineMaster. So Open Camera, I'm going to open it up right now. Okay, so this is what the interface looks like. We can get really trippy and do a sort of matrix effect here, taking a video of the screen, but let's not get carried away. So this is just my gear on the table here. Open Camera lets you do still images as well as video images. Let's just take you through a couple of the settings that you might not have on your native camera. So you can actually lock your exposure and your focus and your white balance depending on what you want. What is white balance? White balance is the kind of the coloring of the scene. So depending on the light you're under, you might want to change the white balance for that. Okay, it's going to start recording now. Let's just stop that actually. Okay, so if you go down into the settings menu on Open Camera and you go into video settings, you'll see a lot of different options available that you would not find in your default camera app. So for example, here under resolution, Sammy was asking about resolution earlier. You'll see a whole lot more options for resolution than are available on your default camera app. So you've got more control over that. You can set your video format. If you wanted to shoot in maybe a different format, you can change the format here. You can um, change the audio source. This is really, really useful. So you can choose the onboard mic, or you can choose an external mic if present. You can optimize it for voice recognition and other kinds of options there. So that's quite useful. You can change the audio channels, mono or stereo. You can choose to lock your screen when recording video so that you don't accidentally stop recording. You can work with subtitles. Bitrate, this is the other important factor that determines quality. So remember, the higher the bit rates, the higher the quality, but the more space it takes up. So here your bitrate can be set to just defaults, or so these first few options will be very low quality. As you go further down to higher bit rates, that's much higher quality. And 200 is like super high, and you're going to use lots of space, but your quality will be max. Generally, if you're at around 10, that should be fine. But yeah, just something to experiment with. Another nice thing to experiment with is your frame rate. So if you're shooting for TV, you might want to shoot at 24 or 25. If you need something that's a bit smoother, you can choose 60, and then right up to whatever your phone supports. So my phone would support 120 frames a second, which will be great for relatively slow motion clips. So you can select your frame rates directly in this app. Yeah, all sorts of other settings here. You can actually save the location information in quite some detail in the metadata of your video. Okay, so let's have a look at some other things here. So this would be your exposure compensation. If you're shooting, someone against a window, they're going to be probably underexposed, so you'd want to compensate for that and overexpose them. And you can lock your exposure, so even if you move your phone around, it won't automatically change. Generally, your phone, if you're shooting on auto, is going to constantly adapt to the exposure and the white balance according to the scene. Okay, so here's your other options for shooting here. White balance, so this would be, if you're shooting under artificial lighting, like indoors, then you might want to choose one of these options. If you are outside, you might want to go with daylight, and you also have the ability to lock that, which is great as well. Okay, different focus options as well. You can choose to focus close up. Sometimes you will have the option to touch to focus, as you can see here. So when you're recording and you want to move focus from your background to your foreground, you can just set that over here by tapping it. And you can also lock that on. So why is it useful to be able to lock focus? You might have a situation where you're interviewing someone and then there are people walking behind them, and you don't want your phone to constantly seek for focus in the background. You want it to be stuck on the interviewee's face. So that's when it would be good to lock your focus. So that's just a very quick overview of Open Camera for much more control over your shooting settings than perhaps your native camera would give you if you need that. Okay, now I'm going to quickly show you KineMaster, which is the editing app. Okay, So KineMaster looks like this. To create a new project, you would hit the plus button. I want to just enable a pointer here if possible. Give me a sec. Can't seem to do it. Okay. So KineMaster is asking you first to select the aspect ratio of your project. So this is your dimensions or the size, the shape of your content. So you've got a number of options to choose from here. You can edit video in any of these shapes. I'm going to go with 16:9 as the default. I can now add material from my phone, wherever it is on my phone, onto my timeline. I've got a few saved here in the favorites folder. This was from an event we did in PE last year. So you can add photographs and you can add videos to your timeline. So I'm going to start off with this video. So you just tap it and it drops it onto the timeline. And you can use your fingers to move back and forth along the timeline. And I'm going to tap to add a photo. And I'm going to tap to add another photo. Yeah. So I've added my elements that I want to work with. You can always add more later. Then I'm going to hit the tick on the top right over here. Now I've got my timeline and I've got my preview of the video. If you need to zoom out or in, you can just use your fingers to pinch in either direction. So if you want to see more of what's going on, or if you need more detail, you can then pinch the other way to go in and see how it looks. At any point, you can just hit play on the bottom right to play what you've got there.
And that's when to work it out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Obviously, with the photo, there's no audio. So I'm going to show you a couple of things that you can do in this app, how you do basic edits of video. So typically, if you do an interview like this one, you're going to want to just extract some bits and pieces from it that you want to use. So I'm just going to plug in the speaker here so that you can hear better what is going on. Okay, let's push play and hopefully this works. Okay, just give me a moment. I'm just going to make sure the audio is coming through on the speaker. Okay. So just summarize for us your top 3 or 4.
Look, I think number one should be engagement in
So
real
I think you can
time.
hear this.
You have to respond to all the queries that you get, especially if you're an official account. You get a lot of traffic because social media is the most preferred.
So using your finger, you can just jog along to wherever you want to be in the clip.
Or put a sad face or a happy emoji, but do something. People don't like being ignored. Secondly, in terms of your output.
Okay, so let's say we wanted to set an in point where he starts with his second point there, where he says secondly. So
your query will come back to you, or just like or put a sad face or a happy emoji, but do something. People don't like being ignored.
Okay, so we've paused this now by pushing the pause button, and we've got pretty much the exact location where we want to start this. So I now need to select the clip by tapping on it. It will turn yellow. That means that just that one clip is selected. Now I can do things with that clip. In this case, I want to remove everything to the left of the playhead, which is that red sort of cursor, because I don't want what came before that. So I hit the scissors button on the top right, and I now have options for trimming or splitting this clip. I can either trim everything to the left, in other words, get rid of everything to the left, or I can trim to the right, get rid of everything to the right, or I can split that clip into 2 at that particular point, or I can split it and insert a freeze frame, so a still image grab at that point. In this case, I want to trim to the left of playhead, so I'm going to click there. And all the first bit of that clip is now gone, and it should start with him saying secondly. Let's play.
ignored. Secondly, in terms of your outgoing
So
message,
it needs a fine edits. How do we do fine edits? Select the clip and then using your finger, just drag in a little bit from the left. And you can actually see his mouth and when he starts talking. So it's around about there.
ignored. Secondly,
So I still have that ignored word. So let's take that out. Okay, now I can see he's going to start with secondly.
Secondly, in terms of your outgoing messages, you have to obviously post your product messages and your campaigns, etc., etc. But
Okay, let's pause it there. We just want this really short soundbite just for these purposes. So I'm going to select the clip again. And now I'm going to go to the scissors button and I'm going to, let's say, split this at the playhead. Okay. Now that's broken that up into two clips here, separated by the plus. So now I can go and look further in this footage and see if I want anything else that he says.
a engaging image, preferably a trending image or memes or whatever the case. But it has to be aligned to the context. It has to be aligned to the memes that people like. So I usually say use a meme that's trending. Find memes that are trending. There's one of my favorite memes is as the
Let's go when he says one of my favorite memes.
there's one of my favorite.
Okay, so about there. So select the clip. Now we want to remove everything to the left. So scissors and trim to left, select. Now I'll see that these clips flow into each other quite nicely, hopefully.
Etc. etc. One of my favorite memes
There we
is
go.
as the Cloudy Mutsweni meme where he does this.
And let's stop him there. Okay. So select the clip. Now I want to remove everything to the right. So scissors and trim to right of playhead. Okay, so now I've taken that whole 5 minutes interview and I've got just two sound bites from it, just about 17 seconds worth, down from the 5 minutes original footage. Now I might want to rearrange these clips on the timeline. So if you want to move a clip further to the back or further to the front, you would long hold on it until it vibrates, and then you can just move it with your finger to the beginning or to the end. So I'm going to drop this right at the beginning. That clip now is my first clip.
One of my favorite memes is as the Cloudy Mutsweni meme.
Okay, so that's basic cutting and trimming of clips. Now, what you might want to do is add text. You probably would want to add text. So text is a layer. On the right of KineMaster in the interface, you'll see the circular menu. Media, layer, rec, and audio. Media is what we used to add our own video and photo on our device. Layer is what we would use now to add either another media layer on top or an effect or sticker or text or even handwriting. So we're going to go with text, and then you can type the name of the person or their position or whatever text you need to put on here. So he's TK, he's from city of Joburg. That text will then appear on your screen and you can move it around with your finger. You can resize it. You can put it wherever you want, change the font, change the color, and so forth. This text is not very legible because it's kind of clashing with his shirt. So I either need to change the text color or I need to add a background to it. So on the right of this text menu, if I come down to background, I can make that enabled. It's black. I can obviously have any color. And if I wanted to go across the whole screen, I just hit full width background. Okay, now I can see that a lot better.
One of my favorite memes is
that text. You can also choose to fade in or animate if you want to. So, and also just remember that that text is now a layer. It's an element in your production. So I can hold on it and drag it if I want to move it elsewhere, or I can actually make it appear for longer by selecting it and then dragging out from the right, changing the duration. How long do I want that text on the screen? I want it just about there. 4 seconds should do it. And I want that text to come in with a bit of a fade. So I'm going to click on in animation and give it a fade. And then maybe when it goes out, I want it to sort of just slide off the screen like that. So now it looks like this.
One of my favorite memes is as the Cloudy Mutsweni meme where he does this. Secondly, in terms of your outgoing message.
Okay, so that's just a basic way of adding text. You obviously do have different font options in here as well. If you click on the, or tap the double A icon, you get access to a bunch of different fonts. So just choose one that fits in with your kind of brand, your look and feel.
One of my favorite memes is...
Okay, so what about the audio in this clip? It's pretty good because he's using, as you can see, he's using a lavalier microphone there. If I wanted to change the audio level of the clip, I would just select the clip. And then instead of hitting the scissors icon, I would hit the audio icon to the right of that. And then I can change my volume. I can increase it, I can decrease it, and so forth. Obviously, it's good to wear headphones when you're editing a video like this so that you can, monitor and make sure that nothing is clashing with anything else. Also, just on a clip, when you have it selected, I'm not going to go through all the options here for you, but you can add graphics onto the clip. You can change the speed, you can reverse it, rotate it, cut different kinds of color filters. You can adjust your brightness like this, and your contrasts, and the colors in the scene. Sometimes you might want to do this, but try not overdo it. It might not look that good. And you can also, change someone's voice if you want to keep them anonymous, which is pretty interesting. Different ways of changing someone's voice here. The other thing I want to mention in terms of keeping people anonymous is how to blur someone's face on using KineMaster. Sometimes you might need to do this, blur someone's face, protect their identity. So obviously, I've named him here, but assuming I hadn't named him, I would be able to blur him by doing the following. Click on layer, then click on effect. Now your blur is under your basic effects, and it's called a Gaussian blur, or you could use the mosaic if you wanted. Now you need to select which area of the screen do you want to be blurred. So that's just demarcated by this little selection area, which you can adjust. So I want to select his face, but it's not really enough. I need to blur him a bit more. I can still identify him. So go to your settings on the right here and change blur strength to something a bit stronger. Now I can't identify him. So when I play that,
one of my favorite memes is as the Cloudy Mutsweni meme where he does this.
Okay, so he was now blurred, and because your blur effect is just an element, you can increase the length of that blur, or you can move it around to different points in your video. So that's a pretty nice feature of this app, is that you can blur someone's face and also change their voice if you need to. So I can just drop the pitch of his voice here, and then I won't be able to recognize his voice.
One of my favorite memes is as the Cloudy Mutsweni meme where he does this.
Secondly,
okay, so I wasn't able to recognize his voice or his face in that clip. Let's look quickly at the photos that I've added here. Obviously, if I'm playing a photo, nothing's going to happen. So how would I add a bit of motion to this photo? How would I zoom into it? So select it, and then instead of the scissors icon, we're going to hit that little middle icon, this one. And now you select your start and your end position. So currently it's starting and ending in the same place, but I want the end position to be a bit more zoomed in. So if I hit now tick and I go and play that photo,
your campaigns, etc., etc.
I've now added a little bit of motion to that photo, just to make it a bit more interesting. So let's talk a little bit about audio. How are we doing for time? 11:30. Okay. So audio, you can click on the little audio button in the circle to add either songs WhatsApp voice notes or audio recordings from your own device into this edit, or you can go and get music from the KineMaster asset store. So the KineMaster asset store, you access by the little icon on the top right. It looks like this. It includes things like different effects that you can use. For news, we don't really worry much with this, but you can play around with it. Different sort of transitions for moving from one clip into another. Again, not very important for news. Elements like icons on stickers you can add on top. Fonts, this is a good one if you want to find a font that's consistent with your branding. Music, obviously. Sound effects, yeah, you can get all sorts of sound effects like cheers and stuff like this. Cheers and jeers. Applause. Yeah, it can be a little bit gimmicky, but if you are looking for a specific sound and you don't have it, you can't record it, you can just grab it from here. There might be occasions where you want to use a music track with your video, so you can preview them here. And then if you want it, you can just click on download. So I've already got some music tracks sitting in the app, the ones here. So if I want to preview one, I tap 1, 2, 3. That's not going to work for me. Maybe this one works a bit better. If I like a track, I hit the plus and it drops it down into my timeline. I obviously don't want this track to start only near the end, so I need to long hold on it and drag it all the way to the beginning. Now, if I push play.
One of my favorite memes is the Cloudy Mussolini.
Okay, so that song is actually a bit loud, so I need to drop its volume because I want to hear TK as clearly as possible. So how do I drop the sound of a music track? Select it, go to your volume, and then drop it so it's at a suitable level.
One of my favorite memes is the Cloudy Mussolini meme where he does this.
Okay, so now you've got a better idea of how that works. That song does get quite loud, so let's just leave it there. You can also do volume envelopes, which means you can change the volume at different points along a clip or in a music track. It's another word for that is ducking, if you're familiar with that. So you can also do that. To do that, you can either use the auto version, which sometimes works, sometimes doesn't, or you can set it yourself by adding keyframes over here. So that's how you would go about adding audio to your little production or to your, your Mojo content cake. You can also record your own voice in this app. Say you've written a script, you want to drop in a narration, you would hit the record button here. It will show you your mic level, make sure it's nice and strong, push start, and it will then let you record your voice right into the app. And when you're ready to stop, you can push stop. And there I can see my little voice recording as a separate element.
You have to obviously post your product.
But obviously now I need to be careful with the levels here because I need to make sure that my voice and his voice and the background music are all nicely balanced. So just pay attention to that as well. Make sure you wear headphones and make sure that your audio is not competing or contesting with each other. It should always be clear to the audience what they should be listening to. Shouldn't be a mess. So that's media and audio and rec and layer. What is the red button in the middle? That's if you quickly need a shot to drop in to your edits without leaving the app. You can just hit that red button. It will then ask you if you want to record a still or a video. Choose camera for a still. And then I can take my photo of whatever I want to take a photo of. And that will then drop straight into the edit as an element, just there.
Messages.
So there it is. And maybe I would want to add text to that photo. So remember to add text to anything at any point. You hit layer and then text, and then you type your text and you can drop it in. Another way of doing that is to select the clip and go to clip graphics. And here you can select some title effects. You can just play around with these. So Mojo mics or something like that. And then your second line of text. So then you've instantly added some animated text to that.
Pains, etc., etc.
Okay, so I hope you're getting an idea of how things come together in KineMaster. So you're adding your ingredients, whether they are visual or audio. You can then move them around, arrange them, trim them using the scissors button, add text using the layer feature. You can add a blur to, keep someone anonymous if you need to. You can add your own voice as a narration using the rec button directly there. You can move things around by long pressing on them and then dragging them to where you want them to be. You can add music, you can add motion effects to photos, and you can add animated text like this. Okay, so let's assume we've reached a point where we are happy with our production and we want to now share this with the world. So what do we do from this point? At the top right of the app, you'll notice the little export or share button. And this now lets you set the export resolution, the frame rate, and the bit rate. Remember, these are three things that determine the quality or the look and the feel of the video. So frame rate, you can typically leave at 30. Your resolution, this is up to you, depending on what your device supports and what you want to do, but a number of options available to you here. So I'm going to select HD 720p, which is generally fine for social media. If you wanted higher quality, you'd go for full HD. Bear in mind, obviously, that this would depend on your original source material being in a higher resolution. It doesn't make sense to work with 720p content and then try and export at 4K. It's just not going to work. It's not going to look great. So you've chosen your resolution, and the last thing is your bit rate. By dragging to the right and to the left, you can make that lower or higher. And at the bottom of the screen, you'll notice that it says, it gives an estimate of how big the file will be if I export at that particular bit rate. So at a bit rate of 10, which is generally pretty good, I'm going to be using 34 megs to save this video. At max bit rates, I'm going to be using 49 megs. At the minimum bit rates, I'm going to be only using 5 megs. So it's up to you, like how much data do you have? How much time do you have? How quickly do you need to get this thing out? How important is the quality? You might want to export a low quality version at first just to publish, and then a higher quality version later if you want to send it back for use on TV or just follow up with a higher quality version. But let's say we go for 5. It's going to use about 20 megs. I hit export, and now it's essentially baking the cake. So it's taking all those ingredients, it's crunching them all down together. The cake is in the oven, it's cooking, and in a few seconds it will be ready to deliver. So now my production appears on the right of my screen. I can either play it back, which I'll do now for you, play it in full screen.
One of my favorite memes is the Cloudy Musweni meme where
and I can just move through it in the same way I would move through any video that I watch on my device, because this video now exists as one file. It's been saved, it's been exported from KineMaster,
Pains, etc., etc.
and that file is now ready to share. If I hit the share button, there's plenty of options for where you want to put this. Do you want to stick it onto your YouTube channel? Is it going onto your Facebook, your Instagram? Do you want to upload it to Google Drive to share with a colleague? Do you want to perhaps share it to WhatsApp or any other software that you might use? Bear in mind, people love sharing videos on WhatsApp. Bear in mind that when you share a video on WhatsApp, it's going to lose a lot of quality. So if you want to preserve the quality of your video, rather upload it to Google Drive and then share the link with someone for the maximum possible quality, or Dropbox. As soon as you're putting it out on WhatsApp, you're going to lose a lot of quality. So those are your different options for sharing from KineMaster. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing from my phone now and go back to my laptop. So I'm not seeing anything else in the chat window. It's 1:45, so we're almost done. Thanks for sticking around. Let me just quickly share a last few slides with you before we do Q&A. All right, so we've had a look at equipment, we've had a look at apps, and we've had a look at different tips and techniques that you can use for best results when doing Mojo. If you're looking for free background music to use with your productions, you can either look in the KineMaster App Store, Asset Store, or you can go to bensound.com, which offers a lot of royalty-free, completely free sounds to use in your productions. The other option is Facebook. They actually have a sound library, which contains a lot of different sound effects, which could be good for jingles if you need to produce those. As well as music tracks that are free to use. Remember, you can't just use any old song that you want in a video. There are copyright concerns that will be taken down if you upload that to Facebook or YouTube. So make sure you're using a song, if you need a song that is cleared for use. If you need strong high resolution photographs just to add another visual element to your story, you can use unsplash.com. Another one is Pexels, P-E-X-E-L-S. Both of those provide images, both video and stills, free of charge and rights free, so you can use them in any production, which is really great. And just to end off with the 11 commandments of Mojo, just if you remember these things, then you will be well on your way to producing some really nice high quality mobile content. Flight mode again is the top tip to save battery and avoid interruptions. Make sure you got plenty of battery and storage. Shoot in landscape unless you specifically need portrait, but just don't mix them up. Get a variety of different kinds of shots. Those different visual ingredients we spoke about. Keep your light source behind you, whether it's the sun or it's artificial light in a room. Make sure the light is behind you. Keep your subjects nice and big in the frame. Keep as still and stable as possible. Use a tripod, use a mini tripod. Avoid digital zooming. Test and check your audio levels. You do not want to come back with a great video, but it's missing audio. So just check that. And avoid blocking your mic and your lens with your fingers. And lastly, have fun. This stuff is actually a lot of fun. Getting out there and being able to record stuff and then come back, and within an hour you've got something that's trimmed up nicely, it's got text, it's got music, it's got whatever else ready to share on social. So yeah, I would just encourage you to have some fun with this and see what you can produce. And if you feel like taking this further now after this training, then think of a story that you might want to go and do. Think of the ingredients you might need for that, who you might want to interview, different visual elements you might want to use, different kinds of text you might want, and then put something together using KineMaster in the dimensions of your preference, and post it to YouTube, post it to Facebook, post it to Twitter, tag AIJC, tag Social Weaver, and let's see what you're able to produce. And yeah, just a reminder to join the Mojo Fest group on Facebook. This is a really good place if you want to continue these kinds of discussions. And yeah, we also, as Social Weaver, also offer this training to newsrooms or journalists or NGOs, small businesses. So if you are interested in more detailed training on these apps and this kind of equipment, just let me know. You can find me on Twitter or send me a message on the Wova app. So yeah, that's it from my side. Are there any questions? Two things in the chats. Thank you, Sammy. Thanks very much. Anybody else got any questions before we wrap? Otherwise, that's it from me. I'm not sure if Chepo, you need to do any other kind of wrapping up.
Nope, you can wrap up.
Well, that's it then. Thanks, everyone. And yeah, drop me a line on Twitter if you want to continue the Mojo chats.